Hello, good evening. Hi, Christy.
Hi.
Hi. So it is the 25th of June. It is a little bit, it's almost 7:30 p.m. here in Germany. And tonight we have Christy with us. And Christy is story number 17 in this series. And let's start. Christy, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. I just got out of graduate school and I studied law for my degree and in graduate school so that I'm going to train as a lawyer in the coming September. So apart from that, so it's really weird that I start with that because that is such a main part of my identity now. But another thing is that I'm also from Hong Kong and born and raised here, and I really love reading, and sometimes I write, sometimes I don't really, and cooking is one of my favorite pastimes and ways to relax.
And that's always good because right now it's been a few months that we need some relaxing. So,
Oh yes.
yeah. So you must have been cooking well.
um I learned quite a bit when I was living by myself, but while I was in uni, and I experimented with some recipes while during the coronavirus. And yeah, I think I baked a bit more rather than just cooking because like baking is a I don't know. If I say that cooking is a way to relax, then baking is sort of like a therapy. And in the way that you knead the bread or how you sift the flour and then how you make a meringue for the sponge cake is it just quite a bit like doing an ASMR on your own, except for that I'm not really a fan of the ASMR thing on video, but it's so soothing to do on your own.
So I
Oops.
I
Mm-hmm.
I'm okay at baking sweets.
Mm-hmm.
I just started baking bread. I must say my first
Uh-huh.
time was okayish, but I've seen so
Yeah, that's
many.
good.
Yeah, so it's okay. I mean, my husband says it could be better, and I say it could be much better. So it really depends. But yeah, but I have seen a lot of videos in these past
Mm-hmm.
few months of all these people baking the most amazing breads and cakes and everything, and it
Oh
is
yeah,
like this.
everyone's doing sourdough bread. It's ridiculous.
Uh, I I'm even afraid of trying, So.
No, I cannot.
No. But yeah, it's good and it's needed, and as you said, it's therapeutic, and why not, right?
Yep.
And
Mm-hmm.
so you told us that that you were studying and you just finished graduate school, and now you'll start well, the first steps into your future, right? But
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
before talking about that, can you just tell us a little bit, what was it before the coronavirus pandemic began? What is
Mm-hmm.
it that you were doing? So I know you said you were finishing graduate school. When it began, had graduate school already ended or not yet? And if not, what changed? What was different? Like,
Ah.
you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I'll run you through a bit, but also have to touch a bit about Hong Kong's background when everything arose, because
Mm-hmm.
this has been a very unstable year for Hong Kong.
Mm-hmm.
So I started graduate school this September,
Okay.
and then um, so basically, I started last year in September. Then the background is that back in June there was already a wave of anti-extradition bill movements, protests, and stuff in Hong Kong since June 2019. So graduate school started in September, and then in November, classes just stopped altogether because um, my campus, my uni, was pretty much in flames after the police sort of like cordoned off a section of the campus roads, a bridge specifically, and then they probably fired like almost close to 2,000 pieces of tear gas bullets into our campus. And so basically one part of the campus was pretty badly damaged. And then we had to stop school. So half of the first semester went online, and we went back in January for some assessments and some makeup classes because not all classes can be done online. I mean, before Corona, because back then we didn't really know what Zoom was or whatever. And then after February, no. So we had these assessments and classes in January, and then comes Chinese New Year in the end of Jan. And then that was when the Corona outbreak in Hong Kong started to get really serious because we had a sudden huge spike of cases that didn't only come from mainland China, but also there were signs of local spreading. So my uni decided to take all courses online, including interactive tutorials. So everything was done online. They had to restructure the assessment. So instead of having 2 or 3 assessments per semester as per the norm, they had to shrink it to only having 1 in the very end of the semester, and they had to like change up the format or something.
Okay, so even before the coronavirus pandemic began, because of the situation in Hong Kong, anyways, your studying had already changed a little bit. You tried or you were going back to the norm, and then the coronavirus pandemic began, let's say, and
pretty
you
much
went back to it. Okay, so it was difficult end of last year and then difficult beginning of year for you. So okay, but okay, now you graduated, you finished, so that's in the past. And now talking about the present, what is it that's happening right now? Always related with the coronavirus, but even more, just tell me what is going on right now in Hong Kong. What are the, I know things are very different there than in the rest of the world, thankfully.
Yeah.
But just tell us what is on the news, what is the topic that people are talking about the most, what is, just give us a look of what is happening right now in Hong Kong.
So right now the hottest topic is about the national security bill, the national security law that the Chinese government is proposing and just inserted into the laws of Hong Kong without going through the proper legislative procedures in here. This is my take on it, but I won't go into too much details because otherwise this entire conversation will probably be just about me ranting about this, and I want to keep this corona related. So about the coronavirus, the thing is, there isn't much news, honestly, just that they're just really normal-ish ones, like they're just saying that, oh, there are no new cases today, or oh, there are like 14 new, and they're all imported cases, and everyone arrived from like Pakistan or the Philippines or somewhere like that. And then I think there was one guy that was diagnosed in the Philippines, and then somehow he ended up in Hong Kong. I think he returned to Hong Kong, or I'm not sure. But anyway, he went to Hong Kong and he died here. I think that was today or yesterday. And then also a few days ago, there was another old lady who died from coronavirus. So it made the total deaths count to 7. But we haven't had a death case since, I don't remember, since probably around March. I don't really remember because the numbers are so sparse. And a few weeks ago, the government gave out a reusable mask for us, for Hong Kongers, and you have to sign up to get it using your Hong Kong ID and stuff. And then the filter is made of copper or something like that. And you cannot really wash it. You could only take it, you can only like soak it in soapy water and then just let it drip dry or something. So basically it was something really counterintuitive because nobody would actually have the time to soak a mask that you desperately need on a daily basis
And
into a bucket of water.
yeah, I'm just trying to picture. Explain to me again, what type of mask is it? Made of what, you said?
Oh, it's a reusable mask basically. Yeah, so, so you know that people, like, if they could get their hands on it, people would use a surgical mask, right?
Yeah, exactly. But this one's not made of. It's what material is it though? I can't
This
picture it.
one is not a this is not a surgical mask. It is a mask that apparently the Hong Kong government designed on their own.
Oh,
So it is made of two pieces of cloth.
okay.
So one is resembling the cover, and the one with the inside. So the inside is like close to your mouth, and then the other one is like another layer on top of that. And
Okay.
in between, there is a filter made with some materials and including copper.
Okay.
So it operates as like a virus or bacteria filter to stop anything from like, so you stop breathing in anything like the virus. But the controversy is that firstly, the mask looks horrendous. And I'm not really saying that because I'm not really supporting the government right now. I'm saying that because it's genuinely hideous. And I don't even want to touch it. It comes in looking like a pack of underwear with the coloring, like the coloring is like really thin beige, brown, and white stripes.
Okay.
And the filter doesn't really fill up the entire mask. It's only like a circle in the middle. So imagine having a circle in the middle up here, and then you have a mask that extends up to your cheek.
Yeah.
So, and it's sort of like bulging in the middle of your face, and then it just, I don't even know how to describe it. And if you also put in the really ingenious way of washing it, which is really just not convenient for Hong Kongers because we are always needing a mask and we don't really. I mean, like the culture in Hong Kong is really hard for them to like get used to reusable stuff. And if you have to make people use it, if you have to give people a reusable mask that is such a hassle to use, then they wouldn't even bother to use it. Not to mention that it doesn't really look good. And yeah, that was one of them.
Yes, because you
And
said that the way of washing it is a bit annoying, right?
yeah,
You
yeah,
can't dry it, you can't wash it you have to hand wash it and then let it dry drip, right? And
yeah.
mm,
And it's like I personally have been using another reusable mask as well. It was from a UK company called Cambridge. You might have heard of it.
yes, I
And
did, and I even tried to buy one back in February, and they were like
oh,
sold out.
dude,
And then around in the beginning of March, I told my husband, okay, look, if we buy it now, we'll be able to get it in June. Should I just go ahead and buy it? Nah, whatever, don't bother, blah, blah. And then around April, end of April, he's like, you know what, just go ahead and buy those masks. And I try, and they didn't even have the next delivery. It was like August, and then it
ah,
stopped. And yeah, so I know what masks
oh,
you're talking about. And yeah, I don't have that one.
yeah. But the thing is that if you have used a Cambridge mask or basically other reusable masks, and you use as a comparison, you know that for other masks, you can basically just hand wash it with soap and water, and you can just let it dry. Oh yeah, um, for the Hong Kong mask that the government gives out, you can't even wring it for it to dry properly.
You
Like
can't.
you cannot wring it. So you can probably like just, so you can't like wring it to make it dry. You have to just dip it in a bucket of soapy water, take it out, and then let it drip.
Okay. Wait, let me just
Yeah.
ask one more question about the mask. I know we're talking a
Yeah.
little bit too much about the mask, but I find
Mm-hmm.
it interesting because I hadn't read or heard about these masks provided by the Hong Kong government. The filter that you were saying that is in the middle, the one that has bits of copper, that
Copper.
you take it out, right? You
No, no, you don't.
it's always there, so that's why you can't
Yeah.
rig it. Okay, okay, okay.
Yeah. But
Now I
I
get
like personally, I find it to be a bit stupid because for Cambridge masks or other masks that you wash, when the filter is stuck in and you cannot take it out, you can ring it. So,
Yeah.
and not to mention that there have been people who are skeptical about the filter inside because breathing in copper particles can be harmful to your health.
Mm.
It's like, why people don't even use copper utensils anymore, because they say like the ions could be somewhat in your food, and when it oxidizes it can somehow become toxic for your body. This is my chemistry knowledge from like 10 years back, and but I remember reading about this in high school, so I see where the concern is coming from. But like, firstly, I don't even use the mask, and secondly, I just don't really trust the filter, so I don't use it
So
personally.
would you say that your friends and acquaintances and the people you see around you, they mostly don't wear that mask, or they do?
My friends do not. My friends do not. And on the streets, I've only seen probably like a 10% of the population wearing it.
Okay.
I might make it 20, but
Okay.
it's
And
kind
the
of
rest.
rare to see people doing that. Yeah.
And when was it? Okay, last question about the masks. If not, it's going to be a mask conversation here. But when when was it that the Hong Kong government provided these masks?
I think it was in May.
Okay, so
But
okay,
but the most serious outbreak was in March when people from the UK and Europe came back.
okay, yeah,
Yeah. So basically, by May, the new cases that we have was probably like less than 10 per week. But when people from the UK came back, it was like almost at least 10 cases every day. So you can see that it's, we would say it's really untimely. And especially with people like just desperately trying to get masks in the beginning of February or in late January when the epidemic was just starting.
yeah.
The mask price rose by like 4 times at least the normal one. So say if the normal price is like 5 to 6 euros for a box of 50, it became like it became almost like 25 for a box of 50.
No.
So it was a really steep surge, and people were just really annoyed at why the government wasn't doing more in January, and you're now only doing that in May. And they also announced that they would be giving out 10 individually, I mean, not individually, I mean, 10 face masks for every single apartment or every single household. So even if even if you're only living alone, then you have 10 masks. But for people who are living in the same address, but they have like 8 people or like what, 5, they still get 10. And this is one of the other. This was announced 1 or 2 days ago, I think, and this is more recent. But people are still bashing the government for just not doing enough.
Okay, so it's a lot of
Yeah.
mask talking lately, but it makes sense because the whole world has been and is talking about masks all the time, whether to wear them, not to wear them, which
Yeah.
ones are they good, not good, what's the point, what's not the point. What are your views as someone from Hong Kong that you have that in your culture anyways, because you've had experiences in the past with other epidemics, so maybe you can even tell us about that. What is your view of the rest of the world, most of the rest of the world, that keeps on debating whether to use or not to use a mask?
Okay. I'll try to keep myself short because the main point is that I believe you should wear a mask to protect yourself and also to protect the people around you.
Mhm.
And I'm the kind of person, like at least personally for me, I'm the kind of person who wears a mask whenever I'm sick, so that I can so that I can prevent people from around me from getting the same flu, flu or whatever that I have. And then for Corona, I mean, okay, so let's go a little bit back to start 17 years ago, because Hong that was when we in Hong Kong first had a taste of an epidemic. And that was when we realized that masks are actually vital, because I think that was mostly driven by fear. Because in those 2 or 3 months of SARS, I think, I don't really remember because I was just a kid at that time, but I remember everyone was so scared of just leaving their homes. It's like they were voluntarily conducting lockdowns within the community. And there were there were at least 7 doctors or nurses or healthcare providers that passed away. And also the infection number was close to 3 or 4 thousand. Okay, now don't quote me on that because I don't really remember the figures. I'll probably get back to you in a bit when I actually read up the numbers. But that was a really hard lesson because like the economy was really bad and everyone was literally afraid of stepping out of their homes. And not to mention that there were some residential complexes that didn't really have the best drainage system. And then the virus spread inside the building with the bad drains. So there were a few complexes that had to be completely evacuated and then revamped because they were literally like harboring the virus. So it made us really paranoid. And with this fear, I think it mostly governed Hong Kong's reaction towards the COVID, because we want to protect ourselves the best that we can, especially when there are so many variables out there. And especially when we know that China has a history of concealing up figures just because they don't think that is necessary or just to protect the good image. Some of us learned to distrust China and therefore were a few of the earlier ones to procure masks. Like my friend was the one who introduced Cambridge to me, and she actually got them shipped here in mid-January. So this is how much she does not trust the official data. And then there are other people who realize that this epidemic is not simple stuff, so they started getting them in mid to late January when the masks were still at a lower price. I wouldn't say it's the reasonable price, but at least not like charging you 50 euros for a box, because that happened. And yeah, so basically I think Hong Kong's reaction about masks, and at least mine, and also mine, I wouldn't speak for everyone, but at least for me, is in parts governed by fear about the unknown, because we did not know how infectious COVID is. We did not know the results, how you would be after you recover, if you recover, exactly, and how was it transmitted. And I think that played a huge part in our reaction. Yeah.
And from what you were telling at the beginning of our conversation, obviously things in Hong Kong in respect with the pandemic, things have stabilized. You barely have new cases, and if you do, they're usually imported cases, but you are still wearing masks.
Everyone is.
Everyone is, and yes, of course, it was already part of your culture. It was already part of the knowledge that Hong Kong had with the epidemics in the past. But at the same time, it's the knowledge, correct me if I'm wrong, that it really just takes an exception. It takes nothing, that if you don't control it, then you can have another outbreak. You can have...
Exactly.
So, yeah. And what about, you mentioned about these imported cases. Tell us a little bit about what is the procedure right now. If, for instance, I would want to go to Hong Kong, do I have to go through quarantine? Do I have to be isolated for a certain amount of time? Or does it depend what country I'm coming from? Just out of curiosity.
Oh, I can tell you, I can answer that. Definitely you have to go through quarantine, but the exact arrangements would depend on where you're coming from. And I think your nationality or like ethnicity, no, not ethnicity, but your nationality might have something to do with it because I think for people coming from Europe or Canada or America, they have to be screened for the virus just after they step off the plane.
Okay.
And they have to be sent to a sort of like a hotel that was changed into a testing center for people to wait for the results, like quick testing with their sputum. And after they're cleared, they have to return home for 14 clear days. And they have sort of like a bracelet with them that they have to, that sort of tracks their location or something like that. I'm not quite sure how it works.
Okay.
And then after the 14 days, you're free. And I also remember reading, like, in February or March, when people from Japan or other places are coming back to Hong Kong, they had to stay in a in a public housing estate that was not yet lived in, and then they converted it into a quarantine center. And everyone coming from certain countries have to stay in there for 14 days before they can leave and return home. I forgot the exact countries, but I can update you about that. And there's actually a really interesting exception with people who are traveling to and from China, I think, that they don't have to go through quarantine, or the quarantine is like shortened. But my memories might be playing tricks on me right here, because I might have mixed it up with the mention in Taiwan, but I'm not sure. I'm sure there's some sort of special treatment with regards to Chinese, with regards to people entering from mainland China, but I'll need to look it up. Yeah.
Okay. Well, yeah, I mean, we are so overwhelmed with so much information, different information from, and then you obviously read up on different countries. So the restrictions and everything that comes with it do get a little bit mixed up, at least in my head. So I completely understand. But overall, from what my takeaway is that Hong Kong has been and is quite strict with whoever's coming into Hong Kong, especially if coming from Europe, Canada, or the US. Because you mentioned immediately once you get off the plane, you're checked, and then you're taken to this facility to be wait for the results, and then you have to be home or somewhere. You can't just go out for a drink or walk around.
Yeah.
You have to stay for 14 days. That's pretty strict. And I say this because, as you may know, in Europe, borders are and have been lifted, traveling has started, and many of the countries here do not have a quarantine. Some countries ask for some type of document that says that you have been tested a certain amount of time before. Others don't. So there isn't this thing of you have to be quarantined for 14 days and checked. Some countries do have it, but most don't. At least the plan right now is not. And as I can see from your face, from your facial expressions, you are in the same, you have the same worries as a lot of people in Europe have, that it is not good, especially because, as we've seen, cases are still happening all over the world, but also in Europe. I don't know if you read, I can tell you a personal experience, something personal that has happened here in Germany. In the area where I live recently, there's been an outbreak and obviously, because there's the fear that the virus has spread, there's around 400,000 people that have been brought in lockdown again, and they're tracing and seeing and testing where has the spread gone. So this is Germany that, as you may know, Germany has had one of the best responses in the world, not the best, but one of. And if it happens here, and it's still happening here, this started happening like a week ago, so it's very recent, and the lockdown happened a couple of days ago, very recent. From your facial expressions, I see that you are thinking, what are you doing? Am I right?
Honestly, yes. I would like to talk a bit about the government's response and about the borders in a bit,
Mm-hmm.
but my opinion on what the European countries are doing are that, are you out of your bloody minds? I I'm okay with you opening the borders because there are people who need to travel,
Mm-hmm.
but if they need to travel, shouldn't you make sure that your country is safe from any incoming cases? Because otherwise, I would think that you're you're trying to, what's the word, to binge on the opportunity, to to bank on the chances that the people coming in or have somehow been under self quarantine or lockdown for the past whatever months, and they're never infected with the virus, or they're fully recovered, or whatever that is,
And that
which I
on their
think
way
is
to the airport, because also that on their way to the airport, they didn't get infected, right? In the flight and so on. Yeah.
so I think that was a rather brave policy, I would say. And I seriously remember people talking. There was an Italian pizza place in Hong Kong, and the owner spoke once about the coronavirus pandemic and how it is in Italy because he heard it from friends. And people actually praised Italy once for stopping all flights to and from China, because China at that time was the epicenter of the entire pandemic. And that, okay, so I thought it was really smart until he said that they're stopping all direct flights from China to Italy only. And I was like, wait, but people in China don't really get to travel internationally with direct flights that often, so they're usually flying on transit. And they're not stopping any transit flights that somehow end up in Italy. So, I mean, I can't fault the logic. And it can't exactly like stop anyone from going inside Italy, because that would be really draconian. I don't think this is how the Italian government works. But that shows in parts the ignorance that I see in some of the government leaders. And I can't say I'm not disappointed.
I mean, it's funny that you mentioned this about direct and not direct flights, because indeed that was the situation, not only with Italy, but with other countries. For instance, when the US did the travel ban from China at the end of January, and then it really began beginning of February, it was the same thing. When I first heard of that, I thought, okay, but you're talking about direct flights. What if someone is just, going to Paris for a couple of days and then traveling to the US?
Not to, yeah, not to mention Hong Kong is actually a very popular place for them to go in transit, because Hong Kong has a lot of, okay, except for, okay, so Hong Kong has direct flights for many countries except for Europe, because I think there was only, like, for example, I think there's only one direct flight going to and from Vienna to Hong Kong.
Mhm.
And the same for Rome and France. I don't think it's even any direct flight for Rome, but there is only like one or two flights per day going
Sorry.
to and from Rome. So, say like, even if we're in Hong Kong, we would fly transit, and not to mention people in China who have a more closed off airspace, and not to mention they have more difficulties in traveling, because the last time I heard they have to somehow prove that they are of good standing and have enough money before they're allowed to leave the country. But I'll just leave it at that, because otherwise that would turn into like what, a politics discussion. But then, actually I want to talk a bit about the borders in Hong Kong, and it how Hong Kong gradually closed off its borders, because that is actually a very interesting phenomenon that we see, and
Mhm.
something that we still constantly berate the government for. So when the first cases started appearing in Hong Kong in mid to late January, people were already saying that do not trust China because it was starting at the fish market or something in Wuhan,
The wet
and
market
then
in Wuhan.
the wet market, and then like it just spread like wildfire from there. And then people were saying that okay, so you do not have to only stop entry from people from Wuhan because people actually move around the country. If in case you're not aware of that, people have legs and they're trains and stuff. So and especially when it was almost time for Chinese New Year, there's one thing in China that's really common. It's called Chen Wan. So a direct transliteration would be like a spring transit, and it's basically where
Yeah.
sort of migrant workers they move. So they move from city A to city B for work for the whole year, and then they only return home for every single Chinese New Year. So this is a massive transit going on, and then by the time Wuhan closed off its own borders in, I think it was,
23rd of January.
yeah. And then people were already like frantic because Wuhan is no longer the only epicenter because people carrying the disease have potentially spread to other parts of the country. So at that time, Hong Kong was only stopping all trains because we have trains going to and from China, which personally I don't agree with, but whatever, it happens, it is like that. So they stopped all trains going directly from Wuhan to Hong Kong. And then people started pouring in, no, not pouring in, but cases still continue to rise in Hong Kong because people still come in from mainland China. And the cases then we see are not only limited to have an origin in Wuhan. And then we were rightfully angry because this is still the beginning of the epidemic. But it's clear that the source is from China, from mainland China. Now, I do not mean any like disrespect or something in case some people would attack me for being like attacking mainland Chinese or something just because I'm from Hong Kong. But the fact is that, and then there were medical professionals in Hong Kong. They were going on strike for every single public hospital. They went on strike and they formed a union just so to pressure the government in closing off the borders of China.
When
Because
was this?
to the strike, I think the strike was probably in like late January to early February. It all blends together. I honestly forgot. And also because like sidetracking a bit, I was in a voluntary quarantine during that period because someone in my apartment building was diagnosed. But so that might be also why I was really like jumbled up on details on those days, but whatever. So the medical professionals, the doctors and nurses in public hospitals went on strikes. And there was massive controversy around this because they were like saying, oh, you're a doctor, shouldn't you be saving lives? And but then the doctors are like, oh yeah, we are doctors, but also humans. And do you want the government literally killing us just because we do not have enough masks, we do not have enough protective gear. They're providing outdated equipment for us, and the masks that are like thinner than sheets of paper.
So Hong Kong basically had the same problems as the rest of the world. As you know, I don't want to say the whole world, but most of the world, most cities, most countries, most governments, and obviously most hospitals had that exact same problem. They didn't have enough protective gear. There were no ventilators or not enough ventilators, not enough ICU beds or departments, not enough nurses and doctors also, right? Okay, so it's interesting to see that although Hong Kong had lived through a big epidemics, and obviously is and has been more aware and has been lucky. It's not luck, right? Because you have to put your own energy and you really have to put your own part. It's you still have, or you still had the same problems that we've had in Europe, we've had in South America, in Asia, India is having right now, Brazil is having, and the United States, right? In states like Texas. Okay, yeah, it's we're all the same in the end.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because one thing I see about Hong Kong is that we just encountered the shortages in healthcare resources earlier on in like January or February, and coupled with the social movements in the past year, quite a lot of medical professionals were incensed by what the government was doing or the lack of action. So the only way that they could see to protect themselves was to go on strikes, because if hospitals go on strikes, then shit gets real, excuse my language. And then so I think that was just 1 or 2 days after the medical professionals went on strike, and then the chief executive announced to close off all borders that allow entry, direct entry from mainland China, except for 2 channels. I think they closed like 4 out of 6. But people were complaining that it was not enough because people would still find some ways to go into Hong Kong in those via those methods. I think at that time there wasn't even like a mandatory testing system for people arriving from the airport, so they could pretty much just roam free. The mandatory testing was introduced a bit later, so there was quite a bit of public outrage at that. And so I would say that that was actually the first steps that the Hong Kong government took to actively stop the virus from spreading. But personally, as someone who has lived through both pandemics, I honestly do not see this as the most effective thing that they should have done.
You do not.
Do not.
Okay. I mean, in general, the pandemic is a very difficult topic to discuss. There's too many opinions from one side to the other, too many studies that support both sides, too many examples that contradict the other side. So I think this is my personal opinion. The only thing we can do in order to see what was done well, who did it well, is aside from learning as we go, because we need to, the
Yeah.
final judgment will be done once the pandemic is really over and people really looked into each action and inaction from the different governments and really
Yeah.
have the lessons learned then. But again, it is important to, even right now, look at the different countries, at the different actions and learn as we go, not wait until everything passes, because then it will not pass, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So we already spoke a good amount about the measures here and there that Hong Kong took, but is there maybe something else that you would like to add, a specific measure that was good or was bad, or that maybe the intent was good but the result wasn't, or just that it was done well, that the Hong Kong government took in order to stop the spread of COVID-19?
I would talk about there was a regulation that forbids group gatherings of more than 4 people. So you can go out for meals, but each table has to be distanced at 1.5 meters or have those dividing boards between them. I mean, partition between them, between the tables. And also
When
that
was
you cannot
this?
have more than,
Or are you talking
sorry,
about now or in the past, or both?
it started in March. It's still going on now.
Okay.
I think it was lifted like 1 or 2 weeks ago, but I don't really remember because I haven't been dining out much since. Um, so in March, they introduced a new rule that there has to be distance between the dining tables in restaurants, and everyone has to be wearing a mask except for when they're eating or drinking.
Mm-hmm.
And you cannot have more than 4 people gathering at the same cluster. So you can only have 4 friends gathering out there. And then this is going to link back to some of the social movements that I talked about earlier. because people have a theory that this is actually a measure disguised by disguised by an effort to curb the spread of disease, but it was actually one that was implemented to stop people from gathering and protesting on the streets. I'm not going to go into too much details, but I just want to share this theory with you because it's one of the things that the government has done, and people have had this view on it. Like for me, I think I've honestly given up on deciphering the intentions behind these policies because you can only come up with so many conclusions and torture yourself by thinking about that. But I'll update you on about the regulations. Is that it was sort of relaxed to allowing 8 people for a group gathering,
Okay.
and then you have the restaurants have to for the previous for the strictest when the regulation was the most stringent, the restaurant could only accommodate half of its maximum capacity. So say a restaurant can accommodate 20, then not only do you have to get dining tables per distance, you also can only accommodate 10 people at most. And then they lifted the half requirement, the half maximum number requirement first, and then they relaxed the requirement for 4 people to 8 people after. And then I'm not sure about the restaurant partitioning or distancing because restaurants have still been doing it. Exactly. And I don't really notice any difference. And there is now no limit on the amount of people that can gather, I think. I think it was less than 50 or something right now. Mm-hmm. So that was like a gradual relaxing. And
when you say relaxing, from what I understood about Hong Kong never really went into lockdown. It wasn't what you saw in Italy. It wasn't what you saw in Japan. It wasn't even what you saw in New Zealand either. This was more, take precautions. We are watching. If we see a cluster or an outbreak, we'll immediately react, but just go on doing. So if you go to work, go to work. If you have to go to a supermarket, go to a supermarket. If you have to go to dine, a business or a date, then go dine. But, there's this, only have a mask and take it off when you drink or eat. There's been a lot of debates, like I already mentioned, the pandemic has been a debate. That's what it has been over and over, a debate from one side and another. And another debate has been, you have some people that think that lockdowns are necessary, and that most of them were late, that they should have been done earlier. Other people, so the other side of the coin is say that lockdowns are not necessary because look at the examples of Hong Kong, of South Korea, of Taiwan, and they actually do more harm than good because they also affect the economy. What are your, coming from Hong Kong, obviously, and having lived through the side of the debate that says, no, we do not need a lockdown, seeing how the economy has been and is, and just seeing what goes around the world, what are your views on that? What side of the debate are you on and why?
The way that I see it, Hong Kong doesn't really need the lockdown because people are already on lockdown on their own. Like they were doing it voluntarily by themselves. And we have enough of this consciousness to be aware that this pandemic is not simple stuff. It's not just a common cold going around the world in 80 days or something. But it's actually something very real. So I think like coupled with the SARS fear that I talked about earlier, I think it is in part something that really largely contributed to Hong Kong's view on whether lockdown is necessary. Actually, we also think that the restaurant gathering order is really stupid because oh yeah, and it also closed down pubs and beauty salons for 14 days
You
because
did.
they're saying
Hong
that
Kong did.
yeah they
Completely.
closed it yeah they had so basically places with a liquor license, they cannot sell alcohol for a certain period of time. They were lifted 2 or 3 weeks ago, and it started in March. And then also beauty salons could not could not carry on business, also with the same duration as bars and pubs. And the government's logic was sort of like, oh, people would do intimate and stupid things when they're drunk and they would promote the spread of the disease. I think that was actually the official wording, official explanation of that. And then so people like slammed as stupid, bar owners do. And I'm sort of ambivalent. Oh, yeah. And then after the bar ban, there were actually some people who held a private party at a bar that was supposed to be closed, but there were liquor around. And I think there were 30 or something people ending up infected from the party because one of the people who attended was like a suspected case or something. So I'm going to put it as two parallel events, but so we can see that large gatherings in a really cramped place is honestly not the best idea in the face of a pandemic, but it doesn't really justify. I mean, just because one party ended up with 30 people infected doesn't mean that all parties will end up with the same consequence. And I don't see the logic behind beauty salons either, because I just don't. Like, what are these manicure places or like facial places gonna do to spread the virus? Except for the people are not wearing masks, but the estheticians should be wearing them. I'm just not really sure about the
The
logic behind
distance,
that.
right?
Yeah, I'm honestly not quite sure, but I won't go too deep into it because I don't think I'm the best person qualified for
From
giving
from what I
opinion
read,
on
for
that.
instance, hairdressers, right? So if you're washing my hair, um, and your hands are here, your face, or even if you're doing a facial, our faces are quite close. So especially for a country where mask is not mandatory or is not enforced, or the individuals don't on their own use them, then that already, it's much closer than the 1.5 meters, the 2 meters that are recommended. And so more than anything, it's the distance for these type of hairdressers, estheticians, manicure, which is needed. But yeah, you said that you thought the restaurant restriction was a bit stupid. Why did you say that? Is it because of the same idea that if there's an outbreak at one party, it doesn't mean that it will happen at the other party, or why?
I remember oh, okay, I don't quite remember my reason at that time because I think I analyzed it a bit when it first started, but I think the most oh yeah I found the pub restriction the most unreasonable, and then the restaurant one was okay-ish, but I still don't really see a logic behind that because like if you keep people at a distance, then people within the 4 people who are having dinner would still be infected anyway, and there would still be people, and they would still individually have close contact ones, and they would still be infected if that's the case. So, like for me, it sounds like something that you're trying to do, but you're not
Sure.
tough enough to do it completely.
Mm. I mean, like we
Yeah,
said,
I don't really know how to phrase it. Yeah.
No, I understood what you meant, that if the restriction was a group of 4 friends could dine together and you still had the restrictions of social distancing, you still had the restrictions that people could only take off their masks when they were eating or drinking, then by allowing these people to go to restaurants and having these measures, you are still banking on, the expression you used earlier, that hoping that these friends of 4 will not get infected and then go back home and infect others.
Yeah, so I didn't really see the logic behind that. So if they want to prevent a total outbreak, then just stop people from going around Hong Kong. But they're not. They're allowing you to have some sort of freedom, but not really. It's sort of like making you have a curfew, but it's not exactly stopping the. Okay, so I mean, say for example, like you're having a curfew in a very socially unstable time, but say the curfew is like 10 to 6, 10 p.m. to 6 p.m. But then the activities that people are trying to stop mostly happen at 3 or 4 p.m. or like 8 p.m. Then what's the curfew gonna do? Like you're trying to deter people from staying up late just so that they wouldn't stay out. So they would prefer to stay at home and choose to not engage in these activities.
And
Yeah.
we need to also remember though that your perspective is obviously based on Hong Kong's reality, and Hong Kong's
Yeah.
reality, thankfully, is eons away from the rest of the world. So you can wonder, okay, does it make sense to not have facials or not? Because everything
Mm-hmm.
else you do have, and you are doing social distancing and you are wearing masks, and the cases that you have are very few and very apart, and they're important. There's really no community spread, and if there's an outbreak, yeah.
There was actually some community spread. There was.
No, but I mean right now,
And
today that we
oh yeah,
speak,
there's no. Yeah, you're right.
there's not. And if there is, the reaction is immediate. Contact tracing, people go, testing, stop. So your perspective on what couldn't be done or shouldn't right now is based on your reality, which is a very good reality compared to the
Yeah,
world.
you're right.
So it's very interesting though. It's very 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 interesting and very different. And just you mentioned a little bit earlier how one theory that combines the pandemic reaction, action, response of the Hong Kong government, and also the unrest that has been taking place before, is wondering if this restriction of how many people can gather had not only to do with caution towards making sure that the virus does not spread, but also could it be a way of preventing people from gathering and making plans or speaking about a protest or something. And obviously the situation is different, but I find it very interesting that there is the same theme, let's say, of untrust or of lack of trust towards your government, the government.
Yeah.
And we have seen that a lot in many different countries at many different times. So either in February, in January even, or March, or even now in June. And it's it is sad because it gives more fuel to the pandemic to do its job, infect and destroy. And because you don't know, is the government telling me to do something because they they know what they're saying, or is the government not telling me to do something because they don't know? And if they don't know, who knows, right? And we see it in South America, we see it in Asia, we see it in the UK, we see it in the United States. If you have been following, you have the country that is like, no, we need to be careful, wear masks, social distancing, this thing is real. And then you have the other half that is saying, nothing's wrong, everything's fine, let's think about the economy and who to trust, who not to trust. So it's really the wrong time for so many countries, so many citizens to have no trust in their government or have a lack of trust in their government. It's scary, but it's the reality of 2020.
I think it's something that would naturally happen either way, because if you do not trust the government, this pandemic is not the only thing that's driving you to not trust the government.
Exactly. The lack of trust was already there before the pandemic, and that's the pity of it, because of corruption. Look at South America, Latin America, so many countries, so many governments, you have stories of corruption. So because the citizens have been used to some drama, some scandal here, finding this and that, there is this lack of trust. And then you get into a pandemic and you don't know, is the government telling me to do something for my good, or is the government not telling me something for their good? And makes it harder.
It does.
It really does. But again, it shows us that everyone's from different areas, different backgrounds, different cultures, different experiences. But the pandemic has shown us that the problems are very similar. The reasons might be different, but the problems themselves are very serious.
Yeah, you're right.
It's very, very, very interesting. You already told me your reactions from that friend of yours that talked about the Cambridge masks, and she had already bought the masks, and then your questioning and just your experience in general. But maybe can you just tell me, was there a specific situation, or was it when your friend bought the masks, but was there something that you heard on the news, something that someone said or you watch? Was there a specific situation in all these moments, in all these months, that made you realize, wait a second, this is worse than what the world thinks, what Hong Kong thinks, that what China thinks, this is bad? Or was it gradual, or was it a bunch of things at the same time?
I think it was gradual, because I noticed the first few cases starting from China since like December. There were these scarce few from the wet market. And then my friend was already asking me to order masks in early January. Like she's saying, like just in case, to make sure that we have masks for the next few months, because you can use a Cambridge mask for 6 months. So she's just asking everyone so she can look out for them. And then for me, I personally ordered it because I have a history of being really sensitive in my lungs and basically my entire respiratory system. So I thought it would be better to err on the side of caution and just get it. Like, why not? I'm gonna use it anyway. And I'm not gonna use it now, I'm not gonna use it later. And then I think it was the gradual build-up of cases and also the lockdown in Wuhan. And there are actually some reports that there are more infected numbers in Wuhan than you can actually see, because people died before they could be tested for the virus. So they're just hastily buried and nobody ever knew what came out of them. And then, I don't know, it was just really gradual, and it just suddenly, it was really gradual. I realized it was going to spread very quickly, but I was very skeptical as to the consequence of having recovered from the coronavirus. Like one of my theories was that, oh, it's just like you're gonna get pneumonia and then you recover, because the case with SARS, I mean, COVID was named as like the second SARS. And the thing with SARS is not exactly the issues you have with your lung after. So you're obviously significantly weakened by having such a serious thing happening in your lung, not kidding. But the main side effects that we see are from using the medications that cause bone problems. So I thought maybe the disease itself is not so serious, but it might be the other surrounding stuff, especially when it's a viral disease, then there's nothing to treat except for like palliative treatments. And then I had another theory that, okay, so if this is spreading so quickly and people are like just getting out of the hospital so quickly, so is it like Spanish flu the second, where it's literally just a flu? Because in Hong Kong, about 10 years ago, we had like a mini flu outbreak that people in the world were criticizing us of being overreactive, but then people were like damn paranoid after SARS. And I would think that was a swine flu in 2009. Yes. So I thought, like, for one moment, I also thought that maybe it's just like another flu. But then there were more and more reports emerging from overseas, and then I saw a picture. I actually could not find the source of it. But then there's someone showing me the X-ray images of someone who has recovered from the coronavirus, and it was literally showed that the person's, like, all the bronchi and bronchitis and basically those branches inside your lungs are calcified. So it was a really huge wake-up call for me that, okay, all the theories I had previously do not stand anymore, because this virus, not only does it attack the lung like crazy, there's no really ways to treat it, and it spreads very quickly and it's dangerous, especially with rumors saying that it's a man-made virus. Well, I cannot say it's true or not, because like there's no one saying it is or not. I don't want to like speculate too much, because speculation too much is bad for your mental health. But if there's this possibility, I know that China could probably do like anything that they could. And there have been reports saying that the very origin of the virus was actually a lab inside China. Then I cannot let sight of that possibility and really believe that the virus is stronger than we ever thought. Because in this situation, it's better to be safe than sorry. And yeah, it was very gradual, I think. But
Gradual.
if you would say, I mean, I would probably say that it's very gradual. But the final thing that made me really believe was the X-ray picture.
The X-ray picture, yeah. And
Yeah.
I mean, the problem is, again, it's a very new virus and we don't know the consequences. Yes, you recover and some people recover and they're completely fine. Some people recover and they're not the same as before they got sick. But the question is, whether you're from one or the other, what happens in 6 months, in 1 month, in 2 years? We really, because time hasn't gone by. So you cannot tell me what's going to happen in 2 years with someone that has partially or completely recovered from this disease, because there hasn't been the time to study it, right? So there's also that in mind to keep in mind. And you mentioned now the rumor, the possibility. You have had people that have hinted or mentioned that it could be possible that it is a man-made virus that could have been either released by mistake or released on purpose. And personally, I don't believe that. The reason I don't believe it is because sometimes, unfortunately, the truth, what happens in reality, is so much less than what you can imagine,
Yeah,
that just because of your fear or how you feel, it is easier for you to believe the unbelievable than believe the believable and understand and face the facts, right? But this is my
yeah,
personal opinion. But I have heard that rumor. And again, I believe that it is one more thing that will only be able, I mean, obviously there are studies and there is evidence, there's more evidence that this is a rumor than there is evidence that it is not a rumor. So there's more evidence that says it came out of the wet market, from, what animal was it? The name of the animal doesn't come up in my
was it
head.
the bat?
Yeah, like, yeah, specific name of the bat. Then it is, man-made. But again, it is something that history will have to prove in the future, right? And so on.
Yeah,
But
and I also want to just clarify that we're like, yeah, we have to bear in mind the Hong Kong China dynamic since like years ago. And this is very seriously impacting how we perceive the coronavirus in Hong Kong. And honestly, I think my opinions can be very biased, but yeah, it's like, I don't know. I really have to just put in some explanations about the social movements out there just to give context to all these emotions and beliefs that we are having, because you can't have one thing without another.
they're
So
connected, right? Yeah.
they're not so connected as in you're not really connected as in like coronavirus is not a social movement, but
No, but
the
your reaction
background.
to the
Yeah.
pandemic is based on what has happened before the pandemic, right? With the social movements. And
Yeah, as the context. Yeah.
it's, again, another difficult thing. It's obviously you feel it more because you are from Hong Kong, you're in Hong Kong, and you have been living it, than other people from abroad that are familiar or not familiar with it and are not living it, right?
Yeah.
Again, very difficult. Maybe, I don't know, maybe in my next question, you could give me your perspective with that in mind. So this dynamic of Hong Kong and China, and maybe without it, and we see if there's a difference. You told us when you realized, you told us the measures that have been taken, you told us about the experience and fear and knowledge from past epidemics and how that has affected the reaction of the Hong Kong people, and your views, even you specifically, Christie. Based on all this, could you just tell me a little bit about what are your hopes? What are your concerns? What do you think is going to happen in the next few days, in the next few weeks, with the pandemic in Hong Kong, in China, around the world? What is it that you don't want it to happen? But just tell us a little bit about your thoughts about the coronavirus pandemic. What are your hopes and what are your concerns?
Honestly, right now, all that I can think of is that I hope this coronavirus is over as soon as possible. This is my only hope right now for every single place in the world. And my concern is that with the borders opening up in Europe, there might be a second wave of outbreak, which I'm very concerned about. And for Hong Kong and mainland China, I think like the one thing in common is that I still want the coronavirus to be over as soon as possible because it's really taking a toll on a lot of things in life. And as to concerns about Hong Kong, I'm not sure if the anti-gathering rules are going to continue.
Do you think
And
they should or that they shouldn't based on the virus? Or do you think that Hong Kong is in a place that it's stable enough that it doesn't really need them?
I can't tell because there are actually more cases recently than I've been used to seeing for the past few weeks. So I'm hoping the number would go down.
Mm.
It's like there was a period where there are no cases for maybe a few consecutive days. And then if there is a case, then there's only one new. But then now, at least in the past week, there are like 2 or 3 days of like 10 or more cases. So I still cannot tell whether the rules will continue or there will be more stringent ones in place. And as for me in China, since I don't know, I still want the pandemic to be over, but I can't really say what I'm concerned about them because information are not exactly the most readily available.
Transparent.
So yeah, it's not as transparent. So I'll just say I hope this second wave that we know of in Beijing are going to be resolved very soon.
Yeah, that has been a concern. You
Yeah.
gave your thing, your concern, and what you hope doesn't happen. Yeah, it's basically the same hope everywhere and the same concern everywhere, right? You just said in Hong Kong, there's been a couple of more cases than usual. In Europe, and let's clarify, it's not only Europe that is opening the borders and is going to start and has started traveling in and out. You have the same thing in South America that it's going to start and it's starting. You have in small islands around the world also, and in Asia. So it's the whole world that little by little is opening their borders. And
Oh
yeah.
yeah. Oh yeah. I just want to add one thing about the charity match in Croatia, I think. Novak Djokovic organized a charity tennis match in Croatia, and then it turned into a mini outbreak. And then quite a few tennis stars were infected, including Djokovic himself. So one of the other things that I'm hoping for is that people actually know the importance of protecting themselves and others, even when you're trying to maintain solidarity within the community. And just please get well, people. The tennis world would literally suffer without these people.
Yeah.
And I hope they've learned the lessons because, I mean, personally, I have been wanting to watch the French Open originally held in May, but now that with the coronavirus, I don't even know if it will be on in September, and even if then if I'll be able to go and watch it. And just like, I don't know, I can't really articulate my thoughts right now, but these are all I have. Basically, like best wishes, and I hope everything will be over, and whatever new outbreaks that we see will be over soon.
Yeah, and just be careful. And just like the example that you gave with Djokovic, and even if you want to do good, remember that doing good, that the pandemic doesn't care why you're gathering. If it's to have a party because you feel like it and you're selfish, or if it's because you are, doing a charity and bringing people are putting money in order to help a orphanage. So good or no good, the pandemic cannot tell the difference and doesn't care. So be careful with the gatherings, do social distancing, just think about the others, think about yourself. And it was a very good example. 2 nights ago, I think, or last night, I heard my husband, a friend of his, had called him and saying, Djokovic, he has
Yes.
it. Yeah, so it was a big deal. It is a big deal. And it just shows that no matter how good your intentions are, you have to be more cautious in this pandemic. No?
Yeah.
To finish, because it has been really a pleasure speaking to you. There were so many things I wasn't aware of, I didn't know, and it has been very, very interesting to see and hear your thoughts on the coronavirus, the situation in Hong Kong, and now your hopes and concerns, and your little message to everybody, right? And also your feel good, Djokovic, get well soon, right? Um, if you could give a message to Christie, the Christie that is going to be here in 14 days, so your future self, what message would you give her?
That's a hard one. Um, Probably like just chill and relax as usual. I don't know. Because honestly, with regard to the pandemic, I think I'm doing already the best I can. Like I'm not freaking out every single moment about any possible outbreaks. I'm just taking it a day at a time. And I think I would like to tell my future self to continue on that in case I have a panic attack on whether things would turn bad or something. Yeah.
Okay, so Christie, take care of yourself and relax. Just be cautious,
Hmm.
relax, and take care of yourself. That's a very good message. And I think we should all really think of that. And we need to be able to be careful, but relax and
Hmm.
just take a deep breath every day and just keep on going forward. Christie,
Yeah.
again, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
It has, not to sound repetitive, but it really has been a pleasure talking to you. We have spoken a lot
Same
because,
here, Laura.
and
Yes.
I really think we could just speak more, but let's stop.
Yeah.
Let's stop it here because, anyways, we will see each other in 14 days.
Yep.
So, Christie, thank you very much, and I will see you in 14 days.
Yeah, sure. See you.
Thank you. Bye.